The classroom buzzed with the hum of diverse life forms. Floating luminescent jellyfish-like beings hovered near the ceiling, crystalline entities shimmered in soft pastels, and serpentine creatures coiled lazily around their desks. The air smelled faintly of ozone and flowers, an artificial blend designed to accommodate as many species as possible. On one side of the room, a group of human students sat together, their postures relaxed but their eyes sharp. They weren't the largest or most physically imposing species in the room, but something about the way they carried themselves drew attention. Whispers floated among the alien students, curious murmurs about the new arrivals from the infamous Mundo de la Muerte. The Deathworlders. Diego leaned back in his chair, arms crossed behind his head, eyes half closed but alert. His short black hair stuck up in uneven tufts, and a faint scar ran down his forearm, a story left untold. Beside him, Hannah tapped rhythmically on her desk, her foot bouncing with quiet energy. Mateo was grinning, the kind of grin that said he knew something nobody else did. They all had that look, like they'd seen storms and survived them. "Attention, students," the teacher's voice echoed from the front of the room. Her species was called a tauan, a bipedal being with 4 eyes and soft, feather-like tendrils for hair. She was tall and willowy, her movements smooth and deliberate. Her name was Instructor Vaughn. "Tomorrow we will hold a cultural exchange event. Each of you is encouraged to bring an item or creature that represents your homeworld's heritage." She raised her 4-fingered hand to silence a ripple of excited chatter. "This is an opportunity for understanding, not competition. Be mindful of your choices." The aliens immediately erupted into conversation. The crystalline student, Frix, hummed a bright, resonating note. "I shall bring a harmony orb from my nesting pool. Its light changes to match the moods of those around it." Several students chimed in with awed approval. "I'm bringing a bloom shell," said Volge, a translucent jellyfish-like being whose bioluminescence pulsed softly. "They float in perfect synchronization with each other. It will be soothing." The other students nodded, their features shifting in what their species recognized as gestures of agreement or approval. The humans, however, exchanged looks that were unreadable to the aliens. Diego's eyes met Hannah's, and her lips quirked into a grin. Mateo stifled a laugh behind his hand. "Humans, do you understand the task?" Instructor Vaughn's voice sharpened as she glanced at them. Her eyes lingered a little longer than necessary, as if expecting them to need clarification. "This is a chance for peace, not provocation. I trust you will not bring anything disruptive." Diego sat up, his face a mask of sincerity. "Course, Instructor. We'll bring something special. Something that truly represents our world." His voice was smooth, respectful, but there was a glint of mischief behind his eyes. Vaughn eyed him with suspicion but moved on. As the class ended, the human group stayed back for a moment. Hannah's grin widened. "So, who's bringing what?" she asked, her voice barely containing excitement. "I've got Cazador," Diego said, leaning forward. His smile was slow, deliberate. "He's been itching for some fresh air." "Bringing the hunter, huh?" Mateo chuckled. "Bold choice." Hannah tilted her head, thinking. "I'll bring Naga. They'll love her." She shot a glance at Diego. "Or hate her. Either way, it'll be fun to watch." "Fun," Mateo echoed. "That's one way to put it." Diego tapped his desk twice, his grin sharper now. "They think we're fragile," he said quietly, his eyes drifting to the other side of the room, where the crystalline student Frix hummed a calming tone to himself. "They think peaceful means safe. We'll show them what safe really looks like." None of them laughed, but they all knew exactly what he meant. The aftermath of the demonstration left the classroom in a tense, uneasy quiet. No one spoke, but the way the alien students glanced toward the humans said everything. They weren't just curious anymore, they were wary. Fear was a tangible presence in the air, sharp and electric. It wasn't the humans themselves that frightened them. It was what they brought with them. Frix's crystalline body glowed a soft, anxious green as he leaned toward Vil. His voice low but sharp. They call those pets. Those are predators. His tone held the disbelief of someone who had seen something that didn't fit within the rules of his understanding. They brought hunters into a place of learning. Who does that? They're from a Deathworld, Vo replied. His body flickering a warning red. They live with danger. Maybe they think everything is like that. His voice trailed off. His eyes locked on Hannah, who was calmly stroking the smooth scales of her serpent. Her eyes met his, and she smiled, slow and deliberate. Volke looked away first. Instructor Voln paced the front of the room, her eyes darting to each of the containers. She hadn't spoken since her last comment, but her silence spoke volumes. Her gaze lingered on the container holding Cazador, her feather-like tendrils twitching in quick, nervous movements. Finally, she turned to face the class. This exercise was meant to foster understanding, she said, her voice sharp as polished glass. To showcase the nature of your worlds in a way that promotes peace. Instead, some of you have chosen to display power. Her eyes locked on Diego, then shifted to Hannah, and finally to Mateo. Power that is not inherently violent, but unmistakable all the same. Power and peace aren't opposites, instructor, Diego replied evenly, his gaze steady. His tone wasn't defensive, just matter of fact. Back home, being peaceful doesn't mean being helpless. It means knowing you're capable of danger, but choosing not to use it unless you have to. He glanced at Cazador's container. That's why he listens to me. He trusts me. I trust him. Instructor Voln's tendrils flicked, her eyes narrowing. Trust built on fear is not trust. Fear's part of it, Hannah said, still running her hand along the back of Naga's head. Her voice was calm, casual, but her eyes were sharp. But it's not the whole thing. You respect something more when you know what it's capable of. She glanced toward the aliens watching her, eyes lingering on Fricks and Vel. You're afraid of Naga, right? But now you know she won't hurt you unless you give her a reason to. That's respect, even if you won't admit it. There was no response to that. The silence that followed wasn't just quiet, it was unsettled. The aliens shifted in their seats, glancing at each other but avoiding the human's eyes. That's not respect, Vel muttered, still pressed against the wall. His body's glow shifting between yellow and blue. It's survival instinct. You're just teaching everything to be afraid of you. Hannah tilted her head, gaze steady. Maybe. But you're still alive, aren't you? Instructor Voln's tendrils stiffened, and she raised her hand to signal the end of the discussion. That will be enough, she snapped, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. Return your creatures to their containers. The demonstration is over. The humans obeyed without complaint. Hannah tapped Naga's side twice, and the serpent coiled back into the cloth bag with a slow, fluid grace. Mateo clicked his tongue, and the ferret darted into its box with a flick of its tail, quick as lightning. Diego crouched next to Cazador's container, his fingers tapping the side in a rhythm too deliberate to be random. See you later, buddy, Diego muttered as the spider shifted inside. The quiet sound of its legs tapping against the walls of the container echoed in the stillness. The lid clicked shut. The other students watched with thinly veiled suspicion, their gazes sharper now, more calculating. Before they had seen the humans as strange, maybe even naive. But that illusion was gone. Now they saw them for what they were. Creatures that lived alongside danger and didn't flinch. After a moment, Instructor Voln spoke again, her tone more measured but still firm. The purpose of this exercise was to foster understanding, she repeated, as if saying it louder would make it true. I encourage you all to reflect on what you've learned today. Understood, instructor, Diego replied, voice polite but unmistakably firm. We've learned a lot too. The class was dismissed not long after, but the weight of the human's presence lingered like a shadow. The aliens didn't approach them. They didn't ask questions or share curious glances. They watched, not with the innocent curiosity they'd had earlier, but with caution. As the humans gathered their things, Vil leaned toward Fricks, keeping his voice low. They say their world makes them stronger, makes them tough. He glanced at the human trio. But what kind of world needs you to be like that? Fricks didn't answer. His glow dimmed to a cold, pale blue. The humans were already at the door, their steps casual, unhurried. Diego glanced back once, his gaze sweeping across the classroom, meeting the eyes of each student in turn. There was no threat in his stare, no challenge. Just a quiet acknowledgement, like he knew exactly what they were thinking. When they were gone, the air felt lighter, but no one moved right away. The crystalline student, Fricks, glanced toward the empty spot where the humans had stood. His glow shifted slowly, faint pulses of blue and green rippling through his body. They walk with hunters, he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. And they call them friends. No one argued,